The room was cold. Not the kind of cold you feel on a winter morning, but the deep, lifeless cold of metal walls and silence. There were no windows, no lights, except for a single, stark blue lamp hanging above a metal table. And on that table lay a man. His name was Kale Reyes. He was human. And right now, he was the only human for 1,000 light years. He wore no uniform, just torn gray pants and a shirt stained with his own blood. His hands were bound behind his back with glowing energy cuffs. His face was a canvas of bruises, one eye swollen completely shut, but his other eye, it was wide awake, sharp, watching every move. 3 tall figures stood around him. They were Virkstall, thin aliens with shimmering silver skin and black, bottomless eyes that had no pupils. They moved without a sound and spoke without a trace of emotion. In their minds, they were the most advanced species in the galaxy, the pinnacle of evolution, and they believed humans were nothing more than clever animals, loud, messy, and fundamentally weak. One of the Virks held a small glass tube. Inside it, a liquid swirled like black smoke trapped in glass. It was called Zytherin-9, a virus. One single drop could melt the brain of any non-Virks creature in 6 agonizing hours. It was their strongest weapon, their final test. The lead scientist, Commander Virk, looked down at Kale. His voice was flat, like the sound of stone hitting stone. "You will die soon," he said, "but before you do, you will show us what your species is made of." Kale said nothing. He just stared, his gaze unwavering. Virk gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Another Virk stepped forward, with hands as steady as a machine. He pressed a needle into Kel's neck and pushed the black liquid inside. The moment it entered his blood, Kel's entire body tensed. His fingers curled into tight fists. His breath hitched in his throat. The Virks watched closely, their dark eyes fixed on him, expecting the usual reaction. They anticipated screams, violent convulsions, foam spilling from his mouth. That's what always happened, every time they tested it on a lesser species. But Kale didn't scream. He didn't shake. He didn't even close his one good eye. He just breathed, a steady, rhythmic breath. Minutes crawled by, stretching into an hour. The Virks kept checking their scanners, their faces betraying a hint of confusion. Heart rate steady, brain activity completely normal, toxin levels dropping. "What?" Virk whispered, the single word hanging in the sterile air. That wasn't possible. The virus was designed to be absolute. On the monitor, something strange began to happen. Kel's blood cells were moving faster, swarming the viral particles. They were attacking the Zytherin-9, not just killing it, but breaking it apart, analyzing it. Like a team of microscopic soldiers reverse engineering a captured enemy weapon. One of the younger Virk scientists, Dr. Zier, stepped closer to the monitors. Her hands trembled slightly, a rare, almost forbidden sign of emotion among her kind. She pulled up Kel's genetic profile, her fingers flying across the console. What she saw on the screen made her freeze. His DNA, it was changing. Not slowly, over the course of generations, like evolution was supposed to work. It was happening right now, in real time. "He's not fighting the virus," she said, her voice low and filled with disbelief. "He's learning from it." Virk turned sharply toward her. "Impossible. No species adapts that fast." But the data didn't lie. The lines of code on the screen were shifting, rewriting themselves. Kel's cells were building new proteins from scratch, creating new defenses, new biological structures. Every second that passed, he was becoming something more. Back on the table, Kale finally moved. He lifted his head slowly, deliberately. His one good eye locked onto Virk, and a cold fire burned within it. "You think this will break me?" Kale said, his voice rough but utterly calm. "You don't know what we are." Virk took a step back. Not out of fear. Fear was an illogical, primitive emotion. It was confusion. This was beyond logic. This defied every biological law the Virks had ever discovered. Outside the lab, alarms began to beep softly. Not emergency alarms, data alarms. From every sensor attached to Kel's body, new signals were popping up, flooding their systems. Heat spikes, unprecedented neural surges, cellular regeneration rates that were completely off the charts. Dr. Zier stared at her screen, her hyperlogical mind racing. She remembered old, obscure reports that had been dismissed as myths and primitive folklore. Stories of humans surviving impossible things, surviving the vacuum of space for minutes, enduring lethal radiation storms, walking out of poisoned water sources and frozen wastelands. They always came back. They were always stronger. And now she saw why. It wasn't just about survival. Humans didn't just survive. They transformed. They adapted with a speed that was terrifying. Kel's breathing grew deeper, more powerful. His skin, once pale and cold from the room, now glowed with a faint, internal warmth. The cuts on his face, the deep bruises, they began to close. Not slowly, like a normal wound healing. It was fast, visibly fast, like time itself was speeding up for him and him alone. Brooke finally found his voice, the command sharp and urgent. Terminate the subject, now. But before the guards could even react, Kel sat up, just like that. No struggle, no warning. The energy cuffs around his wrists sparked violently and then fell apart, melting from the inside out from the sheer heat radiating from his body. The Virex froze. All of them. Kel stood. He was tall, quiet, his body now humming with a palpable energy. His eyes, both now open and clear, burned with something ancient and fierce. He looked at Dr. Zier, not with anger, but with a strange, unsettling pity. You tested the wrong species, he said, his voice now a low, resonant hum. Then the lights in the lab flickered. The room's temperature jumped 10 degrees in a single second, and for the first time in centuries, the Virex felt something they had forgotten, a primal instinct they thought they had evolved past, doubt. Dr. Zier didn't move. She couldn't. She just watched as Kel took a single step forward, his body crackling with a power that no one, not even he, could fully understand. Outside the lab, deep in the heart of the massive Virex warship, a silent question spread like a virus of its own, jumping from mind to mind. What have we awakened? And in the dark, sterile room, Kel Reyes smiled just a little, because the test was over, and humanity had just passed it, in a way no one, least of all their captors, could have ever expected. 50 years before Kel Reyes ever set foot in that alien lab, Earth was dying. It wasn't some grand explosion, but a slow, suffocating wheeze. The oceans were boiling. The skies had turned a permanent, angry red, and entire cities were buried under layers of ash and heat. Humanity turned on itself, fighting brutal wars over the last drops of clean water. New plagues, born from the toxic world, tore through populations faster than news could travel. By all accounts, any other species would have simply vanished. But humans, we didn't. We changed. In hidden labs and the ruins of old hospitals, scientists started noticing something strange. Children born after the Great Collapse, as they called it, were different. They healed from wounds that should have been fatal. Their lungs could filter the poisoned air. Their blood fought off viruses that killed seasoned adults in mere hours. At first, everyone just called it luck. Then, they called it mutation. But one brilliant, aging geneticist, Dr. Lena Cho, saw it for what it truly was. She called it adaptive evolution on overdrive. See, where other species might evolve over thousands of years, humanity had somehow flicked a switch buried deep within our DNA, a survival switch. When faced with an existential threat, our bodies didn't just resist it, they rewired themselves. They learned from the danger. They grew stronger because of it. This wasn't magic. It was raw biology, pushed to its absolute limit and then forced to go even further. Of course, no one talked about it openly. The world was far too broken for that kind of hope. But quietly, in the shadows of refugee camps and deep within underground bunkers, humanity was becoming something new. Not superhumans, not yet, but something far more dangerous, unpredictable survivors. And for all its advanced technology and galactic reach, the wider universe never even noticed until now. Back in the sterile, white light of the Virex lab, Dr. Zier leaned over a quantum microscope, staring at Kel's blood. The Zytherin 9 virus, a bioweapon designed to eradicate entire species, was still there. But it wasn't killing him. It had become part of him. His cells hadn't just fought the virus, they had dismantled it, studied its structure, and then rebuilt it into something useful. It was now a neural enhancer. Kel's brain was processing information 300% faster than before. How, Zier whispered, her long, silver fingers trembling as they hovered over the console. She immediately pulled up every file the Virex Empire had on humans. Most of them were short and dismissive, low-tech, overly emotional, short-lived, easily controlled. The official story was that the Empire had saved humans during the Solar Wars, offering them protection in exchange for their labor. The reality was that humans were slaves, forced to mine asteroids and clean waste vents on colossal warships. But Zier was a scientist. She dug deeper, past the sanitized official reports. She found hidden logs, classified footage from the first human colonies that the Virex had locked away for decades. One clip was horrifying. It showed a human woman on Mars, caught in a solar radiation storm with no protective suit. She should have been vaporized in minutes. Instead, she walked out of the storm 3 days later. Her skin was darker, her hair was stark white, and her eyes held a faint, eerie glow. She lived for another 40 years. Another file showed a young boy in the flooded ruins of Jakarta, bitten by a genetically engineered serpent whose venom could liquefy metal. Within 48 hours, his body had produced an antibody so potent, it neutralized not just that venom, but every known venom on old Earth. Zir's mind, usually so calm and logical, was racing. This wasn't a series of random, lucky flukes. This was a pattern, a species-wide trait. She frantically started a new simulation, feeding it all the data she'd just uncovered. What if human DNA wasn't just a blueprint, but a living library? What if every single threat, every virus, every toxin, every blast of radiation wasn't just fought, but recorded, stored, then used to upgrade the next generation, or even the same individual? The answer flashed on her screen in bold, crimson letters. Yes, Kale Reyes wasn't special. He was typical. And that single fact terrified her more than any weapon. The Viriks had always assumed humans were weak because they cried, they argued, they got sick, and they died so young. They completely missed the truth. Human fragility wasn't a weakness. It was the price of their incredible power. Every death, every disaster, every wound, it was all just fuel for their evolution. While the Viriks had perfected their unchanging, flawless bodies over millions of years, humans were in a constant state of becoming something else. And now, one of them had just absorbed a top-tier Virik's bioweapon like it was a vitamin pill. Across the room, Kale stood near the wall, breathing slowly, calmly. He could feel the changes. His muscles felt different under his skin, not bigger, but more refined, more efficient. His senses were razor-sharp. He could hear the low hum of the ship's power core 3 decks below. He could smell the subtle scent of fierce sweat on the guard standing just outside the door. He finally turned to Drive.cyr. "You're smart," he said, his voice steady. "Smarter than the others." She didn't respond, her silver eyes wide. "You think your empire is strong because you never change," he continued, taking a step closer. "But that's your greatest weakness. You're frozen in time. We burn and we rebuild, again and again and again." Zir caught her own reflection in the polished glass of a nearby monitor. Silver, smooth, perfect, and completely static. Her species hadn't evolved in 10,000 years. Kel's species had changed more in the last century than hers had in millennia. Suddenly, a red alert flashed on her wristband. Priority red. A direct order from the High Council. The message was chillingly clear. Terminate Subject Kale. Destroy all biological data. Erase lab logs. Repeat, total sanitization. Her heart, a mechanism that had beat slow and cold for decades, suddenly skipped. They weren't just afraid of Kale. They were afraid of what he proved. If one single, unremarkable human could do this, what could a million do? What could a billion do? And the most terrifying question of all, what if humans finally found out what they truly were? Zir looked at Kale again. He wasn't smiling, but his eyes held something far worse than anger. It was understanding. He knew they would try to silence him, and he knew it wouldn't work. Because killing one human wouldn't stop the truth. The truth was already in their blood. It was in their bones. It was in every child born into a world of fire and ash. In that moment, Zir made a decision. She reached into her robe and her fingers closed around a small data crystal, the secret blood sample she'd taken just moments ago. She subtly slipped it into her sleeve. Then, she walked over to the main control panel and typed a single command. Simulation mode, active. The lab lights dimmed. On the main monitor, fake vitals for Kale began to scroll. Heart failure, brain decay, system-wide collapse. To anyone watching, to the High Council, Kale Reyes was dying. But here, in the shadows of her lab, Dr. Zir leaned in and whispered the first words of a rebellion she never knew she would start. Let them see what happens when you wake a storm. Drive.cyr couldn't sleep. It was a strange sensation, one her species had engineered away millennia ago. But tonight, sleep was an impossible luxury. Not after what she'd seen in the lab, not after watching the human. The human, Kale, was supposed to be dead. The pathogen she'd exposed him to was one of the Viriks Empire's most lethal bioweapons, a molecule designed to unravel biological systems from the inside out. No species in the known galaxy had ever survived it. But Kale hadn't just survived, he changed. His body didn't break under the assault. It learned. It adapted. Now, hidden in the humming quiet of a storage chamber deep within the bowels of the Viriks warship, Zir frantically sifted through archives. These were old files, Data the Empire had locked away for decades, classified under headings like primitive species and failed assimilation projects. Most of the records on humans were dismissive. They called them unstable, emotionally volatile, short-lived. The official imperial narrative was clear. Humans were a minor, fragile species, useful for manual labor, but ultimately insignificant. But Zir suspected there was more to the story. She had to know why Kale was different. Was he an anomaly? Or was the Empire's entire understanding of humanity a lie? She finally found it. Archived footage from early human settlements on fringe worlds. The images were grainy, flickering ghosts from a forgotten past. They showed people surviving in the ruins of cities destroyed by orbital bombardment, breathing air thick with toxins that would corrode Virk's lungs in minutes. They showed them healing from wounds that should have been fatal. One clip, in particular, seized her attention. It was from a colony on a geologically unstable planet. An earthquake had flattened a residential block. From the rubble, a young girl, no older than 10 Terran years, emerged. Her arm was bent at an unnatural angle, clearly broken. Yet, she wasn't screaming. Instead, she was carrying two smaller children to safety, her face a mask of grim determination. Zir pulled up the medical follow-up. Within days, the girl's bone had wear upon itself back together, a process that should have taken weeks, even with advanced Virk's medical technology. The local overseer had flagged it as an anomaly before the file was buried. Zir dug deeper, her 3 hearts beating a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She discovered a forgotten research log from a human scientist named Dr. Lena Cho. Dating back to the first contact period, Cho's work was deemed heretical by the Virk Science Council and suppressed. It spoke of a biological mechanism she called adaptive response. It wasn't just healing, it was a rare, radical trait where the human body didn't just repair damage, but actively adjusted to new, persistent threats. Radiation, extreme cold, alien microbes. Each environmental stressor triggered tiny, rapid changes at the genetic level, not over generations, like standard evolution. This was happening in real time, within a single organism. This wasn't mythology, it was biology, brutally and beautifully shaped by centuries of hardship on their homeworld, a planet of violent extremes. The Virk's Empire, with its stable genetics and perfectly controlled environments, had mistaken human fragility for weakness. They saw humans cry, argue, and die young, and concluded they were inferior. But Zir now saw the truth with stunning clarity. Human survival wasn't about static perfection. It was about relentless, messy, chaotic change. While the Virks had spent millennia perfecting their unchanging forms, humans had spent their entire history adapting to fire, flood, famine, and war. Their so-called flaws, their emotional responses, their unpredictable biology were actually their greatest tools. Fear sharpened their senses, grief bonded their communities, hope fueled their impossible resilience. She cross-referenced her findings with more recent reports from Virk's mining colonies. The pattern was everywhere, hidden in plain sight. There were sanitized reports of human workers who had accidentally fallen into pools of industrial acid, only to return to work weeks later with skin that showed a startling resistance to corrosion. There were records of others who had survived catastrophic oxygen failures in deep mine shafts, and were later found to have developed more efficient respiratory systems. None of these cases were ever reported to the High Council. They were classified, erased, or explained away as statistical outliers. They were hidden because they contradicted the Empire's most fundamental belief, that the Virks were the pinnacle of evolution, perfect and unchanging. Admitting that a primitive species could adapt in ways the Virks couldn't was unthinkable. The entire foundation of their galactic dominance was built on a lie. Zir compiled everything Dr. Cho's research, the archived footage, the suppressed colonial medical files into a single, encrypted data file. She named it the resilience pattern. The conclusion was inescapable. Humans didn't just endure disaster, they used it as a catalyst to grow stronger. Just then, a crimson alert flashed on her wristband. It was a ship-wide security notification. All research laboratories under immediate security review. Unauthorized data access will be met with severe punishment. Her time was running out. The system was already detecting her activity. Her gaze fell on Kale, who was resting quietly in a shielded corner of the storage chamber. The pathogen had receded, leaving him weary but whole. He wasn't a monster. He wasn't a weapon. He was living proof that life doesn't need to be perfect to be powerful. He was the future. A new message blinked on her datapad. This one was different. It was encrypted with a high-level military cipher. A direct order from a source deep within the Imperial High Council. The The words sent a chill through her body that had nothing to do with the chamber as recycled air. Destroy all human subjects. Erase all biological records. Immediate action required, they knew, or, at least, they suspected. The implications of Kel's survival had reached the highest levels of power. They weren't just trying to control humans anymore. They were trying to delete them from the galaxy. It was a desperate, fearful act, because if one human could adapt to their ultimate bioweapon, what could millions of them do? What could a whole species of survivors become if they were pushed too far? In that moment, Zir made her choice. Her loyalty was no longer to an empire built on lies. It was to the truth. She quickly copied the resilience pattern onto a small, crystalline data chip, the same one she had used to covertly save a sample of Kale's blood. After his miraculous recovery, she slipped the chip into a hidden compartment in the sleeve of her robe. A small act of rebellion that felt heavier than a star. She walked over to Kale. His eyes opened as she approached. There was no fear in them, only a calm, watchful intelligence. "They're going to come for you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "For every human in the Empire." Kale met her gaze, his expression unreadable but steady. "Then it's time they learn what we really are." "What's that?" she asked, a sliver of hope cutting through her fear. He offered a faint, tired smile. "Not conquerors," he said. "Survivors. And survivors always find a way." Outside, the heavy, rhythmic tramp of magnetic boots echoed in the corridor. The security squads were getting closer. The purge had begun. But for the first time in her life, Zir wasn't afraid. She had seen the truth, a truth buried under centuries of imperial propaganda and arrogance. She had seen the relentless, beautiful, terrifying potential encoded in human history. And truth, like a forgotten seed buried in cracked, barren earth, always finds a way to grow. The corridor lights bled to red, and a low hum filled the air, the ominous sound of a full lockdown. Heavy blast doors thundered shut at both ends of the hallway, sealing us in. From hidden compartments in the ceiling, security drones descended, their single red eyes scanning for heat, for movement, for sound. The Viriks weren't taking any chances. Zir grabbed my arm, her touch urgent. "We have 3 minutes before the enforcers arrive. Follow me." Exactly. I didn't speak. There was nothing to say. I just nodded. My body was still changing, a relentless transformation from the inside out. My skin felt unnaturally warm, like a furnace roaring under paper. Every sound was amplified. Every shadow held a new, sharper depth. I could smell the ozone crackling from the drones, taste the bitter tang of fear in Zir's sweat. She led me not toward an exit, but away from one, into a narrow service tunnel hidden behind a maintenance panel, a cramped space used for waste pipes and forgotten wiring. The stench of rust and caustic chemicals was overwhelming, but it was a scent of freedom. This tunnel wasn't on any security grid. The Viriks, in their sterile perfection, believed no intelligent life form would ever willingly crawl through such filth. They forgot that humans have been crawling through much worse for centuries just to survive. The tunnel twisted downward, spiraling deep into the metallic belly of the warship Duskfang. Zir moved with a desperate speed, her silver robes catching on exposed wires, tearing at the hem. I followed, as silent as smoke. My new senses, sharper than hers, gave me a warning before she even saw it. "Stop," I whispered. Zir froze instantly. Ahead, a drone hovered, its sensor beam sweeping methodically across a large pipe. I pointed up, a small, square maintenance hatch, barely visible in the gloom. Without thinking, I leaped far faster and higher than I should have been able to and hauled myself through the opening. Then I reached down, grabbed Zir by the arm, and pulled her up as if she weighed nothing. She landed beside me, gasping. "Your strength," she stammered, looking at her arm, then at me. "It's not strength," I said, my voice low. "It's balance. My body just knows how much force to use. It's as natural as breathing now." We crawled out into a derelict coolant chamber. It was dark, cavernous, and dripping with condensation. The air was thick with the smell of stagnant water. The chamber had been abandoned years ago after a reactor upgrade. We were safe for now, but I knew it wouldn't last long. From somewhere outside, a new sound began to echo through the ship's structure. A deep, rhythmic, and terrifyingly deliberate sound. Click, click, click. Enforcers, the elite Viriks hunters, 7 feet tall, their armor fused directly to their bones. They carried whips made of pure plasma that could slice through reinforced steel. Worse, they used neural trackers that followed biosignatures, even through solid walls. "They'll find us," Zir whispered, her voice tight with panic. "Not if we change the signal," I replied. I pressed my palm against a leaking coolant pipe. Steam hissed around my hand, cold and biting. I closed my eyes. I didn't fight the cold. I invited it in. I focused, willing my body to adapt. Zir watched in disbelief as my skin seemed to absorb the cold vapor itself. My body temperature plummeted in seconds. My heartbeat slowed to a crawl. On any scanner, I would now appear as a dead zone, a patch of empty space, devoid of life. "Do it," I said, nodding to another pipe. She hesitated, then pressed her back against the cold metal. I placed my hand on her shoulder. A strange warmth pulsed from my palm into her. A controlled energy I was just beginning to understand. Her own biosignature, which would have been screaming with fear, flickered, then dimmed, masked by my control over my own biology. The heavy footsteps of the enforcers stopped just outside the chamber. We held our breath. Their scanners swept the room. A series of beeps, searching, probing for life. Then nothing. The footsteps moved on. Zir let out a shaky breath she didn't realize she was holding. How she began. "Your fear makes your blood race," I explained. I slowed it, just for a moment, like pressing pause. She stared at me, and for the first time, I saw something other than scientific curiosity in her eyes. It wasn't pity or fear, it was awe. She was looking at me not as a subject, not as a weapon, but as proof of something her people had denied for generations. That life doesn't have to be perfect to be powerful. Suddenly, I stiffened, every nerve on fire. "They're coming back." Zir's eyes went wide. "How do you?" "I can hear their armor joints." I cut her off. "The sound is different. They're doubling back. They suspect a trick." My eyes darted around the chamber. There was only one other way out. A narrow exhaust duct, leading to the ship's outer hull. To the vacuum of space. Deadly for any Virux. But maybe not for me. I met Zir's gaze. "Trust me," I said. Before she could answer, I grabbed her hand and ran. We burst into the duct just as the enforcers smashed through the chamber door below. A plasma whip cracked through the air, missing me by inches and melting a gaping hole in the wall where I'd just been. I didn't stop. I just climbed, faster and faster. The duct opened onto a maintenance gantry on the outside of the ship. Below us, the immense curve of the Dusk Fang. Above us, the endless, silent black, dotted with stars. There was no air. No sound. Only the absolute cold of the void. Zir's lungs were already screaming for air she couldn't find. I pulled her behind a shield panel and pressed a small device from my pocket against her neck. A stolen med patch, modified. It released a burst of oxygen directly into her bloodstream, oxygen I had stored in my own blood. She choked, then gasped a breath. You shared your oxygen. We don't waste anything," I said. Not even a breath. Below us, two enforcers emerged onto the gantry. Their heavy armor protected them from the vacuum, but it also made them slow, clumsy. I waited, watching their movements, calculating. Then, I moved. I dropped from the scaffolding above, landing silently on the lead enforcer's back. I drove my elbow into the delicate joint between its helmet and spine. The armor cracked. A hiss of escaping air. The enforcer flailed for a moment, then froze as the vacuum seized its lungs. The second one turned, but it was already too late. I snatched the plasma whip from the first enforcer's belt. I had never held one before, never even seen one up close, but my body knew what to do. New neural pathways formed in an instant. Muscle memory bloomed like a flower in a wildfire. I flipped my wrist. The whip curved through the silent void like a living ribbon of light and sliced the second enforcer's weapon clean in half. The alien recoiled in shock. I could have finished it, but I didn't. I just stared, letting it see me. "Tell your masters," I said, my voice calm, broadcasting over the comms link I'd already tapped into, that the test subject is loose, and he's learning fast. Then I grabbed Zir and pulled her into a nearby emergency airlock. As the doors sealed shut behind us, alarms blared across the ship. But for the first time in a long time, I smiled. I wasn't escaping. I was advancing. And with every step, with every new ability that surfaced, I became less like the man they had captured, and more like the storm they should have feared. Behind us, the stars watched in silence. Ahead of us was freedom, and a message that was just beginning to be sent. The airlock hissed shut, sealing Kale and Zir inside the dark relay station. This place was ancient, a forgotten communications hub for ship-to-ship signals, now covered in a thick layer of cosmic dust. There were no guards, no cameras. It was as if the Virux, the galaxy's ruthless overlords, had erased this station from their own memory. It was perfect. Zir didn't waste a second. She rushed to the main console, her fingers dancing over the keys with a frantic energy. She spoke quickly, her voice a hushed whisper. "The ship's main network is locked down tight. But this relay connects to the Galactic Open Band. It's a public channel, one that every species, every ship, every forgotten colony can hear. If we send the file through this, everyone will see it. Kale leaned against the cold metal wall, trying to control his breathing. His body was still humming, a strange vibration thrumming through his very bones. It felt like his blood was rewriting its own code in the silence of the station. Every minute brought a new, unfamiliar sensation, but he forced himself to stay focused on the mission. He looked at Zir, his voice steady despite the chaos inside him. Will they believe it? Zir didn't look up from the console. Not all of them, she admitted, her tone grim. But it will be enough. She carefully inserted the data crystal she'd smuggled out of the lab. It was a tiny thing, holding a truth big enough to shatter an empire. On the screen, files began to unfold. There was footage of Kel's transformation, the agonizing process that had turned him into something more than human. There were logs from human survivors, detailing decades of suffering and resilience. And then, the most damning evidence of all, official Vyrix orders, signed and sealed, calling for the complete genocide of the human race. It was all there, all truth. No lies. Before she sent it, Zir added one last file. It was a short video, recorded just hours ago in the ruins of the lab. In it, Kale stood firm, the plasma burns on his chest already healing, his eyes looking directly into the camera. His voice was clear and strong. My name is Kale Reyes. I am human. You've been told that we're weak, that we break easily. But we don't break, we bend, we burn, and then we rise. If you're watching this, you now know the truth, so you have a choice. Side with those who fear change, or with those who become it. Zir paused, her finger hovering over the send button. It's raw, she said. No fancy editing. No music, just you. Kale gave a faint smile. That's all we've ever had, isn't it? Zir took a deep, shaky breath, the kind you take before you change the world. And then she hit send. The file didn't just go to one planet or one fleet. It shot out like a bolt of lightning, a wave of pure information, reaching every listening ear in the galaxy. It reached traders on distant outposts, rebels hiding in asteroid fields, slaves toiling under alien suns. It reached the rivals of the Vyrix, and even the neutral worlds who had always looked the other way. Within minutes, the signal spread like wildfire. On the desolate desert moon of Chorus, a human miner who had spent a decade digging ore for his Vyrix masters watched the broadcast on a cracked, flickering screen. When he saw Kel's chest healing before his eyes, he unconsciously touched a scar on his own chest, a wound from a cave-in that had never fully closed. But now, for the first time in years, it began to itch and then pulse with a strange, impossible warmth. On the ice world of Velm, a group of enslaved Grath, a reptilian species, huddled around a smuggled projector. Their leader, a grizzled old warrior with one cybernetic eye, watched Kel's message and whispered to his people, if the humans can fight back like this, then maybe we can too. Even in the polished halls of neutral hubs like Station Nix, the broadcast brought everything to a standstill. Diplomats froze mid-negotiation. An ambassador from the Insectoid Mirror Collective, a species known for its cold logic, turned to her aide, her antennae twitching with shock. We were wrong, she stated, her voice flat with realization. Humans aren't livestock. They are a biological singularity. Back on the Vyrix warship, the Duskfang, chaos erupted. Alarms blared. But they weren't from security breaches. They were from the ship's own crew. Rumors spread faster than fire through the corridors. The humans survived the cleansing of Zyther 9. He's broadcasting from somewhere inside the ship. The High Council lied to us for the first time in centuries. Vyrix soldiers began to question their orders. Their unwavering loyalty was cracking. High above, in the ship's command spire, Grand Overseer Malkor watched the signal spread across his panoramic star map. His face, usually a mask of calm authority, twitched. It wasn't anger. It was something far more terrifying, realization. He had tried to bury humanity, to erase them from the galaxy. Instead, he had lit a fuse. And now, the entire galaxy was beginning to burn. Zir turned away from the console, her expression a mix of terror and triumph. They'll come for us now, she said. And not just the enforcers. They'll send warships. Entire fleets. Kale walked to the station's small viewport and looked out at the sea of stars, glittering like shattered glass. Let them come, he said, his voice calm. But they won't find just me. Zir frowned, confused. What do you mean? Kale placed a hand on his chest, right over his heart. The injection, it didn't just change me. It woke something up. And I can feel it now, spreading, like a wave. Zir's scientific mind immediately rebelled. That's not possible. Viruses don't work that way. They don't spread without a host. This isn't a virus, Kale said softly, his gaze still fixed on the stars. It's a message, and my body, it's learning how to send it. Zir stared at him, then quickly turned to her scanner, running a bioanalysis. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Deep within Kel's blood, something was pulsing. A new protein structure, one that was self-replicating and perfectly stable. It was harmless to him, but the scanner's projections showed that if it were shared, it could prime other humans. It wouldn't give them his powers, not directly, but it would unlock their own hidden potential, accelerating their natural adaptation. Kale wasn't just a survivor anymore. He was becoming a key, and Earth, its people scattered, broken, enslaved across the galaxy, was full of locks just waiting to be turned. Suddenly, the console beeped, a sharp, clear tone cutting through the silence. It was a reply from an unknown source. The message was short, but it carried the weight of a fleet. We see you. We believe you. Hold on. It was signed, the Free Colonies Alliance. For the first time in years, a genuine smile spread across Zir's face. They weren't alone anymore. Just then, outside the viewport, a flicker of light announced a ship dropping out of warp. It was small, rusty, and flew under tattered rebel flags. It wasn't here to fight the mighty Dusk Fang. It was here to fetch them. Kale turned to Zir. You could stay, he offered. Pretend you knew nothing about this. They might believe you. She shook her head, her resolve like steel. I helped bury the truth once. I will not do it again. Then, she did something that no Virix had done in generations. She reached out and touched a human's hand, not with fear or disgust, but with hope. As their small rescue shuttle docked with the relay station, Kale took one last look back at the stars. The broadcast was over. The truth was out. And he knew, with a certainty that resonated deep in his bones, that in 1,000 hidden corners of the galaxy, humans were waking up, not to fight a war they couldn't win, but to remember who they really were: unbreakable, unpredictable, and unstoppable. 6 months later, the galaxy was not the same. It didn't change with explosions or grand battles. No, this change happened in whispers, in the quiet healing of wounds, in eyes that had seen far too much, and in hearts that simply refused to break. Across the outer rims, human colonies once silent, once forgotten, began to stir. It was a slow, subtle awakening, a ripple spreading through the darkness. On asteroid Theta 9, a human child fell into a pit of corrosive industrial fuel. The workers, grim-faced, expected a funeral. They had seen what that fuel could do. Instead, 3 hours later, they found her crawling out. Her skin was slick with a new, glistening layer of acid-resistant tissue. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just looked up at them and asked for some water. On the methane world of Draxes, a remote farming settlement lost its oxygen recyclers. A catastrophic failure. Virix officials monitoring the sector predicted mass death within days. A tragic but expected outcome. But the humans didn't die. Within a week, something impossible began to happen. Their lungs started adapting, learning to filter the toxic atmosphere. Their blood, deprived of oxygen, turned a faint, bluish hue. Soon, they were walking outside without masks, breathing in the methane as if it were clean air. No one ordered these changes. No lab designed them. There was no grand plan, no secret project. They just happened, because that's what humans did when the world tried to kill them. They answered with life. Kale Reyes, the man who had sparked this fire with a single broadcast, was no longer just a man. He had become a symbol, not of war, not of rebellion in the traditional sense, but of what life could become when it refused to be erased. He and Dr. Zir, the Virix scientist who had once seen humanity as flawed, now traveled together aboard the Phoenix Dawn. The ship itself was a testament to their new reality, a vessel built from stolen Virix parts and sheer human will. Zir had left her people behind, not out of hate or betrayal, but because she finally understood a fundamental truth: perfection without change is just another kind of death. She worked with human scientists now, not to control their evolution, but to protect it, to give it space to grow. And grow it did. The reports poured in daily, each one more astonishing than the last. A miner on Ceres, caught in a zero-gravity tunnel collapse, was found alive. His bones had spontaneously developed a density that let him survive pressures that should have crushed him into dust. A musician on Nova 7, her hand shattered in an accident, healed herself by singing. The specific sound frequency she produced triggered rapid cellular regrowth, knitting bone and tissue back together. In the Free Belt, a teacher taught children to listen to their pain, to feel the precise moments their bodies were adapting. and to consciously help the process along. They were learning to guide their own evolution. The Virix Empire called it chaos, a terrifying, unpredictable mutation. But others, watching from the fringes of the galaxy, called it an awakening. Even rival empires, who had once seen humans as easy prey, stopped hunting them, not out of kindness, but out of a primal, calculated fear. You don't cage a storm. You don't try to enslave a species that turns poison into power. Grand Overseer Malkor, the architect of humanity's near extinction, was removed from power. There was no coup, no battle at the capital. He was simply dismissed by his own council. You tried to kill a weed, one of the elders told him, his voice devoid of emotion. And in doing so, you made it grow right through your palace floor. The galaxy was learning a new rule, a new universal constant. Hurt a human, and they come back stronger. Ignore them, and they build cities in your ruins. Fear them, and you become the past. One evening, Kale stood on the observation deck of the Phoenix Dawn, watching a new human colony rise on a once-dead moon. Pinpricks of light blinked to life across the barren surface. He could see children running through gardens enclosed in recycled air, their laughter silent from this distance, but no less real. He saw a woman kneeling in the red soil, planting seeds, seeds from earth, carried for generations in a simple tin box, a promise of a home that was never truly lost. Seer joined him, her presence a quiet comfort. She wore no formal Virix robes now, just a simple jacket with a human-made patch on the shoulder, a single green shoot, breaking through a piece of gray stone. They're not just surviving anymore, she said softly, her eyes on the nascent city below. They're designing the future. Kale nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. We never wanted to rule the stars, he said. We just wanted to live among them, on our own terms. And now? Seer asked. Now, he replied, turning to look at her, his eyes reflecting the starfield. Now we show others it's possible. Far away, on a heavily fortified Virix training world, a young cadet watched a forbidden recording of Kel's broadcast from 6 months prior. The images were grainy, the sound distorted, but the message was clear. That night, he dreamed not of conquest, not of glorious battle, but of change. And for the first time in his life, he began to question his orders. That was the real victory. It wasn't one with ships or weapons. It was one with a truth that, once heard, could not be unlearned. Back on Earth, now free after a silent, bloodless revolution sparked by that same broadcast, scientists finally opened the old, sealed vaults of Project Phoenix. They found Dr. Lena Cho's final journal, the last record of the woman who started it all. On the very last page, in her familiar handwriting, she had written a final thought. We are not the strongest species. We are not the smartest. But we are the ones who keep going. And in the end, that's what matters. Kale smiled as he read those words, sent to him across light years. He looked up at the stars, no longer a prisoner, no longer a weapon, but simply a human, flawed, scarred, and unbreakable. In a quiet corner of the ship, Seer played an old Earth song through the main speakers. It was a simple, ancient tune from long before the collapse. The lyrics were soft, a gentle melody floating through the corridors of the Phoenix Dawn. We fall, we rise. We learn, we try. Outside, the galaxy turned. Empires trembled on their foundations. And humanity kept growing, because they had never been cattle. They had never been pets. They were never weak. They were the species that turned pain into purpose, the species that turned fire into wings. And somewhere, in the deep, silent dark between the stars, a new whisper echoed, a whisper not of fear, but of absolute awe. Never underestimate the storm in human skin. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more tales from across the galaxy. See you next time.